This automated system just wants me to give up. It's a lovely way to run a business. I didn't look up at the plumber. He stood there, staring at a leaking pipe under the utility sink, leaving gray smears of boot mud on my linoleum. I kept the phone pressed to my ear, listening to that upbeat, synthetic music the gym uses for their customer service line. With my free hand, I shoved a load of darks into the washer, the fabric snapping against the drum. "Press 4 for billing," the robot chirped. I pressed 4. It looped me back to the main menu. A hot spike of irritation flared in my chest. Usually, I keep that kind of thing buried under the polite, smiling mask I wear for the ladies at the ward. In our neighborhood, looking frazzled is practically a sin. If the neighbors saw me fighting with a gym bot in my pajamas at 10 in the morning, they'd definitely discuss it at the next Relief Society meeting. "You want me to shut the water off for a second?" the plumber asked. "That's fine," I replied. I use that overly sweet passive-aggressive tone I lean on when I'm actually simmering. "Whatever is easiest for you." While the bot started its second loop, I glanced at my phone screen to check the time. An Easy Pass notification popped up. I tapped it, expecting the usual monthly summary, but I saw a charge from Tuesday afternoon. It was a weirdly high toll, way more than a standard commute, and it hit at 2:15 p.m. Tuesday at 2:15. Stephen had a budget meeting across town. I stared at the number. It wasn't a massive amount of money, but the location was a bridge he had no reason to cross. I felt that familiar, petty itch. I didn't want to be the suspicious wife, but Stephen always makes me feel like I'm imagining things whenever I ask about the finances, the plumber said. He stepped back and wiped his hands on a rag. I barely heard him. I just kept looking at that toll. By the time I got to work, I couldn't even focus on my spreadsheets. I spent my lunch break sitting in my car, staring at the dashboard. I didn't eat. I've been doing that a lot lately, and my coworkers have noticed. Sarah from accounting actually stopped by my desk and asked if I was feeling okay because I've stopped eating lunch. I just told her I was trying a new fasting schedule, but she gave me this look, this pitying, knowing look, that made me doubt every move I was making. When I got home, the house felt too quiet. Stephen's biological children were in the living room, arguing over a PlayStation game. I walked past them and saw Stephen leaning back on the sofa, laughing at something his son said. He didn't look up when I entered the room. He never really does unless he needs something, or wants to tell me I'm overthinking a situation. I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Did you take the bridge on Tuesday? Around 2? Stephen didn't move his eyes from the screen. He shifted his weight, his shoulder bumping into his son. "Why?" "Just a weird charge on the Easy Pass," I said. "I thought maybe you hit a construction detour." He sighed. It was a long, slow sound that signaled I was now an inconvenience. Finally, he looked at me with a flat expression. "I might have. I had to run an errand for the office. Does it matter?" "Not really," I lied. "I'm just wondering why the auto insurance premium jumped this month, too." "Did something happen?" Stephen turned back to the TV. "Probably just a rate hike, Kelly. Everything is going up. Don't make a thing out of it." I walked away. He ended the conversation before I could even start it. That's how it usually goes. I manage the automatic payments and the passwords, but the actual logic behind the spending is a black box. I suspected he might have a speeding ticket he didn't tell me about, but he just shut me down. An hour later, I cleared the pockets of Stephen's trousers before throwing them in the wash. I found a crumpled piece of thermal paper. It was a receipt from a high-end boutique downtown. It looked expensive, and it definitely didn't look like a work errand. I felt a surge of petty triumph. I finally had a piece of evidence that wasn't just a feeling. I smoothed the paper out on the laundry room counter and scanned the items. It was a specialized orthopedic brace and a set of high-compression socks. I blinked. He bought them for his father. His dad had been complaining about circulation for months, and Stephen mentioned wanting to get him something top of the line for his birthday. A sharp wave of embarrassment hit me. I spent 20 minutes building a case in my head, and it was just a gift for his parent. I crumpled the receipt back up and tossed it in the trash, feeling small and ridiculous. The afternoon shifted into the usual chaos of dinner prep and homework. The favoritism in the house isn't always loud, but it's constant. Stephen spent the last 3 weeks talking about a new laptop for his eldest son. A machine that costs more than my entire home office setup. When I mentioned my own computer was lagging, he told me to try clearing the cache. The tension in the house stayed as a low hum, until the screaming started from the backyard. I ran to the sliding glass door. One of the boys had tripped over the edge of the patio. His leg was twisted at an angle that made my stomach flip. Stephen was already there, hovering over him, his voice frantic. "Get the car!" Stephen yelled at me without looking back. "Now, Kelly, get the car started." I didn't question it. I scrambled to the garage, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. We rushed him to the emergency room. The drive was a blur of Stephen barking directions and the boys sobbing in the back seat. Once we hit the triage desk, the atmosphere changed. The nurse asked for the insurance card. Stephen reached into his wallet, pulled out the card, and handed it over. I stood back and clutched my purse, watching the nurse swipe the card. She frowned, looked at the screen, and then looked back at Stephen. "This isn't going through," she said. Her voice sounded clinical and bored. "The policy is listed as inactive." Stephen froze. He didn't look at the nurse. He looked at me, his face suddenly pale. "That's impossible. I pay the premiums every month." The nurse tapped the keyboard a few times. "It says here the policy was canceled 3 months ago due to non-payment. Do you have a different provider?" I looked at Stephen. He didn't answer. He just stood there in the fluorescent light, staring at the plastic card in the nurse's hand. I looked at Stephen. He didn't answer. He just stood there under the fluorescent lights, staring at the plastic card in the nurse's hand. The nurse cleared her throat, ending the silence. She looked between us, her expression shifting from bored to annoyed. "Another card, or do you want the self-pay forms?" Stephen finally blinked. He reached for the card, his fingers brushing the nurse's hand. "There has to be a mistake. I handle the premiums. I've been paying them." "System says no," she replied. I pressed my palm into my stomach. I stepped closer and kept my voice low. "Stephen, what happened? You told me the insurance was fine when I asked about the dental cleaning last month. We spent the next hour in triage and x-rays. We got the boy into a splint." But the nurse kept glancing at the unpaid balance on her screen. While the doctor explained the follow-up care, Stephen focused on the boy, nodding and asking about physical therapy. He didn't look at me, even when I tried to catch his eye. Walking to the car, I spotted a crumpled piece of paper in the center console. I picked it up. It was a receipt from a high-end auto detailing shop for $200. I stared at the total for a professional polish. I tucked it into my purse. The boy slept in the back, his breathing heavy. Stephen gripped the steering wheel and stared straight ahead at the lawns of our neighborhood. "We need to talk about the insurance," I said. Stephen sighed. He didn't look at me. "I'll call the company tomorrow. It's a billing error. They probably lost a check." "It's an automatic draw, Stephen. There are no checks." He shifted gears with a jerky movement. "Look, you're doing that thing again. You're overthinking it. You're spiraling over a clerical error during a crisis. Just let it go for tonight." I sat back in the passenger seat and stared out the window. Heat flushed my neck. I stayed quiet. The next morning, Stephen didn't speak to me. He brought the boy breakfast in bed and promised more video games during recovery. I watched them from the kitchen. At the office, I stared at a single cell in an Excel sheet for 20 minutes. Around noon, Sarah from accounting leaned over my cubicle wall with a pitying look. "Kelly, you're doing it again," she whispered. "Doing what?" "You haven't eaten lunch in 3 days. I see you just sitting in your car. Is everything all right at home?" I forced a tight, polite smile. "I'm just trying a new fasting schedule, Sarah. It's great for my energy." Sarah didn't look convinced. She nodded slowly, her eyes lingering on me too long. My hands shook for the rest of the afternoon. By the time I got home, I was trembling. Stephen stayed in the garage, tinkering with a tool bench he'd bought for the boys. Silence filled the house while the kids played in the den. I went straight to the home office and opened the laptop. I managed the passwords. I kept the master list of logins for the utilities, streaming services, and bank accounts in a folder I controlled. Stephen handles the big picture logic, the transfers and the funding. He always told me it was too complex for me to worry about. My hands shook as I logged into our joint checking account. I scrolled back through the last 3 months of statements. No health insurance premiums appeared in the statements. No withdrawals, no failed payments. Just nothing. He didn't pay the provider. I traced the transfers. He moved the money in small, erratic amounts. Went into a separate savings account I didn't recognize. Labeled educational fund. That was for his eldest son. I gripped the edge of the desk. Then I saw the other charges. The auto insurance premium had jumped from $120 to $350. I remembered him mentioning a minor ticket months ago. The jump indicated a serious speeding violation. He hadn't mentioned the ticket, and he hadn't budgeted for the increase. Other payments went to a specialized gaming equipment site and a high-end electronics store. The dates matched the new laptop he'd bought the boy. He didn't use his bonuses. He stopped paying the health insurance to cover the gaming gear in the secret fund. I sat in the silence of the office, staring at the screen. My phone buzzed with a text. My sister-in-law asked if we were coming to the family dinner on Sunday. I didn't reply. I stared at the educational fund, line. The cursor blinked. Educational fund. I stared at the line, the dim light of the home office casting long shadows while the boys shouted in the den. 6 months ago, Stephen arrived home with a bottle of expensive champagne, bragging about a windfall from a major client. He used that money for Jay's high-end gaming rig and to seed this secret account. Property taxes loomed in October, and my auto insurance premiums had already spiked. I suspected another unreported speeding ticket, leaving me to cover the cost. Transfer dates didn't align. Instead of a lump sum, the bonus arrived in 3 installments. A few weeks ago, I'd found a jewelry store receipt and spent days imagining another woman, only for it to be a watch repair for his father. This, however, was different. Scrolling through the joint history, I spotted deposits from a boutique consulting firm across the bridge. I opened the shared cloud drive, the place Stephen stored tax documents he claimed were too boring for me. My fingers shook, missing the mouse, as I clicked through folders. Under Missy Enerder. Opening the file, I saw the legal transfer of rights for the proprietary auditing software I'd spent 4 years developing. I had built that tool to automate my clients' reconciliations. Years ago, I shared the source code and logic with Stephen so he could help me find a developer. Now the document stated that Stephen Hernandez, acting as the sole representative, sold the full rights to the consulting firm for $80,000. He had forged my signature. I remained frozen, staring at the loop-de in Stanley. He had tried too hard to mimic my handwriting. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Quickly, I minimized the window and pulled up a spreadsheet. Devin, the live-in nanny, leaned against the doorframe with a stack of folded laundry. Her face remained impassive. At 24, she usually drifted into rooms without a sound, draped in oversized sweaters. Stephen wants to know if you're coming out to help with the boys' dinner, Devin said. For a year, she'd handled the kids' schedules and ran errands for Stephen. I'd seen her in his car, always assuming it was for the children. I'll be there in a minute, I said, my voice cracking. Devin lingered, her eyes flicking to the screen. You look pale, Kelly. Maybe you should lie down. I'm fine, Devin. Right, she replied, staying put. Stephen mentioned he was going to reorganize the bank logins this weekend. Something about streamlining the accounts. A cold chill ran down my spine. He was moving to cut off my access. Thanks for telling me, I said. Devin nodded slowly and backed out of the room, closing the door with a soft click. After the door shut, I grabbed a thumb drive from the desk drawer. I downloaded every bank statement from the last 2 years, every PDF from Missy Kemmer, and the Easy Pass logs. Copies went to a private Gmail account Stephen didn't know existed. Shaking hands nearly knocked over the lamp. I hurried to change the passwords for my personal accounts, professional email, and retirement fund. A quick check of the joint savings revealed another $5,000 moved into the educational fund. 2 days ago. At the office, I'd skipped lunch for 2 weeks. When a coworker asked if things were okay at home, I'd snapped. The boys' laughter drifted from the den, punctuated by Stephen's booming voice praising Jay. I opened the bank app on my phone. The joint checking balance barely covered the property tax. He'd drained the account to fund a lifestyle we couldn't afford. Holding the thumb drive, I realized I had no plan and no money for a lawyer. If he kicked me out of the house, a house in both our names that he managed, I had nowhere to go. A text from my sister-in-law lit up the screen. I ignored it. After unplugging the drive, I slid it into the hidden pocket of my purse and gripped the strap until my knuckles turned white. "Kelly!" Stephen yelled from the kitchen. "Dinner's getting cold. Stop messing around with your spreadsheets and get out here." I closed the laptop. After smoothing my shirt and taking a slow breath, I forced a smile. I walked toward the kitchen, the thumb drive heavy in my bag. The kitchen smelled like roasted chicken and something sweet. The kind of smell that's supposed to mean a happy home. Stephen was hovering over Jay, praising the way he'd handled his physical therapy exercises, his voice booming and warm. He didn't look at me as I slid into the chair. "You're late," he said, finally glancing my way. He didn't stop carving the meat. "I was finishing some work," I replied. My voice sounded thin like paper. Across the table, Devin was helping the younger kids with their plates. She didn't meet my eyes, but she shifted her weight, her oversized sweater sleeve dragging across the granite countertop. I watched her, wondering how long she'd known about the money, or if she'd been the one suggesting the streamlining of the bank accounts. Dinner was a performance. Stephen talked about a new project at the firm, leaning back in his chair with that practiced confidence that used to make me feel secure. Now, it just felt like a lie. Every time he mentioned the team or company growth, I thought about the $80,000 he'd stolen from my brain and my hard work. 2 days later, I stopped trying to figure out how to afford a lawyer. I realized I didn't need one to start the fire. Pulling the thumb drive from my bag, I spent 48 hours digging through the business accessors. Stephen had logged in our shared cloud. He'd been sloppy. He thought I was too focused on the small stuff to notice the patterns. I found the hotel charges in Salt Lake City billed as client acquisitions that aligned perfectly with dates Devin had taken a personal day to visit family. I found the company leased vehicle logs showing trips to the boutique consulting firm that had bought my software. Trips he'd billed as regional site visits. He hadn't just stolen my intellectual property. He'd used his firm's resources to broker the deal and fund a side life with the nanny. Sending the emails took 10 minutes. I didn't write a long emotional letter. I didn't tell them I was a heartbroken wife. Instead, I attached the PDFs of the forged signature and the cross-referenced expense reports. I sent them to his managing partner and the HR director. I framed it as a professional courtesy. An accountant reporting financial irregularities and the misuse of corporate assets. The fallout was fast. In our circle, in this specific Utah community, where your professional reputation is tied to your standing at church, a misuse of funds charge is a death sentence. By Friday, Stephen was gone. Not just from the house, but from the industry. The managing partner didn't even give him a severance. They just told him to clear his desk. Walking into the living room that evening, I found him sitting in the dark. He looked smaller, his shoulders slumped. "What did you do?" he asked. He didn't look up from the floor. "I sent some documents to your office," I said. He stood up abruptly, the chair screeching against the hardwood. "You ruined me. Do you have any idea what this does to my name, to Jay's college prospects? You sold my software, Stephen. You forged my name." He sighed, rubbing his face with both hands. "I mean, honestly, I was just protecting the family. I was putting that money where it actually mattered. You would have just sat on it in some high-yield account. I built it. It was a joint effort," he snapped, his voice cracking. "I helped you find the developers. I managed the logic. I didn't argue. There was no point in arguing with someone who thought theft was a form of protection." The house became a strange, cold place. We stopped speaking unless it was about the children. Devin left a week later. Stephen couldn't afford her salary anymore, and the social pressure of the neighborhood had made her a liability. She left without saying goodbye to me, just packed her bags and vanished into a lift. Living together was a logistical nightmare. The property taxes were due in October, and with Stephen unemployed and blacklisted from 3 other firms in the valley, the joint account was as a wasteland. I spent my mornings at my own desk, calculating exactly how much of my own salary would go toward keeping the roof over the kids' heads while I waited for the legal separation papers to be drafted. One Tuesday night, Stephen came home late. He'd been networking, which usually meant drinking with the few people who didn't know the details of his firing yet. Standing in the hallway, I felt a sudden petty surge of clarity. I walked to the garage and changed the keypad code. It was a simple sequence, something he'd never guess. Then, I sat on the sofa and opened the Ring camera app on my phone. 10 minutes later, the notification popped up. I watched the screen in silence. Stephen walked up to the garage door, his gait slightly unsteady. He punched in the old code. Nothing happened. He tried again, slower this time, pressing the buttons with more force. He waited, stared at the light, and tried a third time. He stood there for 5 minutes, just staring at the keypad, before he finally walked around to the front door and started ringing the bell. I didn't move. I just watched the video feed until the screen timed out. The next afternoon, I went to Target to buy school supplies for the boys. While I was comparing different brands of pasta sauce in the aisle, I saw his mother. She was wearing a beige cardigan and holding a shopping list. We both stopped. She looked at me, her eyes scanning my face for some sign of the perfect daughter-in-law. She'd praised at every Sunday dinner for a decade. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at the jars of marinara. "Hello, Kelly," she said, her voice tight. "Hello, Evelyn," I replied. We stood there for a long moment, the hum of the refrigerated section filling the space between us. Neither of us mentioned the house, the money, or the fact that her son was a fraud. We both just looked at the pasta sauce and pretended we didn't see each other. Thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing your journey with us. It takes an incredible amount of strength to walk away from a life that looked perfect on the outside while dealing with such a deep betrayal. Between Stephen stealing her intellectual property and the secret life he led with Devon, the level of deception is truly staggering. It is one thing to face a crumbling marriage, but to have her professional achievements weaponized against her is just cruel. That final encounter at the store really leaves us thinking. When Kelly ran into Evelyn, she chose a cold, silent distance rather than a confrontation. Do you think that was the most powerful way to handle a mother-in-law who praised her while her son was committing fraud? Or should she have let the truth fly right there in the grocery aisle? We want to hear from you. What advice do you have for Kelly as she navigates this legal separation and the fallout of Stephen's actions? Leave your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and make sure to subscribe so you never miss a confession. Thanks for watching.